Fragments of Silicon, guaranteed not to cut all funding.
All right, welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, are Petty and Golix. Right, let us get to what we colloquially call the news. Golix, why don't you start us off this week?
Well, I'm a little bit tired and sore because we had a bit of snow last night, and I had to rake the roof before going to work, so that was not fun. Other than that, my weekend could have been a lot more restful if I had not been preoccupied with drafting a letter to my elected representatives because of how certain things are going. But I got that done, so unfortunately
Was it an
certified mail.
Oh, it was an actual letter.
Yeah.
I wish my elective
Certified
representative
mail
cared.
is also expensive, and I wanted to do that just to make sure.
Yeah. The times we live in.
Anyway,
When do I get to cancel my free trial to 2025? Asking for a friend.
Golix.
Sorry. Otherwise, not a whole lot going on, I guess. Work is continuing. I'm trying to be better at being in on time or early instead of just slightly late. So I will probably be having to leave earlier on Friday shows.
I mean, that's not a change from what's been going on right now.
I've been staying later on Friday shows than I will be. But yeah.
Deal with that when it comes to it.
I mean, I really only need to be there for the beginning anyway, generally. I just like to sometimes because I like to talk to the people. But, yeah, that's the main thing I got. Video game-wise, let's see, I still been doing a little bit of Balatro. And my dad got to the Fire Temple in Tears of the Kingdom, so after doing the first couple of bits, I, spent a bit of time crawling all over the Fire Temple trying to figure out how you're supposed to actually do some of the stuff because I ended up cheating a lot more than I wanted to on that one. Ironically, while I was just playing with him, I noticed a way to do one of the things that I had a really hard time with on my initial playthrough that makes things a lot more straightforward. And I guess Splatoon is rerunning the favorite chocolate Splatfest for Valentine's season, so I'll probably be on Team Milk again. We'll see how that goes.
Okay. I guess, Petty, you're up.
Well, the car accident saga is still happening. We don't have a new car yet.
I mean, I'm going to imagine that's going to be playing out for quite a long time.
Supposedly, Mom will be getting a better idea at least how much she's going to be getting tomorrow. At least that's what the adjuster told her. When she's actually going to have a check in hand is another matter. But at least it gives us, like, an idea on what we can look at price-wise. So definitely things going on there. Still can't really talk about it. Still waiting to hear back from lawyers about the specific things I, can and can't say on air. So it's better not to say much at all.
Anyway,
as far as gaming goes, I've been kind of like bouncing around between games. Well, it's like I've been playing some Balatro, then I get distracted with something else. Like I've been starting into a Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, and then like sometimes before I get ready for bed, I use the remote play on my phone and play some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. So I've just been kind of bouncing around between games over here.
I do that constantly, but
Yeah.
a bit.
I try to keep it a little more focused, but my brain's just been scattered for obvious reasons.
Yes. Anyway,
And I did actually get a couple Beyblades because they were cheap, so that's been fun to mess around with. I like spinning tops.
well, let it rip.
Indeed. Um, and yeah, can't really do a whole lot because mom doesn't have a car, so I've not been able to go to the card shop. So, yeah, I guess that's it for me.
All right, it's my go.
Yep.
Well, I guess in the subject of continuing sagas, the um, heating unit wasn't quite as done as I was hoping it to be. Mainly because, okay, the installers did a shit job.
Ah,
Like,
happened to you too. We
yeah,
learned that our heater was actually tied into an overloaded breaker. We didn't find this out till we
nothing.
tried to tap it for another space heater and took
Okay,
out power in half the
nothing.
house.
Well, I mean that happened before the new heater was installed. I mentioned
Ah,
that last week. So all the wiring around here has been checked out and
mm,
replaced as needed. No, this was more the actual installation was add on several fronts.
ooh,
First of all, the part that they call the shroud um, is too small for the actual unit.
that's a new one.
So, and also the actual installation people just kind of did whatever.
Oh,
To the
those are the
point where,
best. Wait, no, opposite of that. Those are the worst.
well, to the point where they left exposed bits of metal out there.
Ooh, and yeah, you have kids running around sometimes, don't you?
Yes, and my oldest nephew was asking if he could play with the metal things outside.
That's not good.
So yeah, it's been a bit of a saga.
I would imagine. I imagine heads would be rolling.
Uh, it's been a bit teeth pulling, but at the very least, the exposed material is no longer exposed. We still need a new shroud,
Mm,
um, but that's still pending.
mm.
So you know, fun times. Anyway, on the subject of gaming, let's see. I actually beat Vay, and got all the Steam achievements. Um,
Oh man.
so um, even the elusive gold slime one. Like, so yeah. So kind of been doing the post, bouncing in between games, uh, ritual where I look for something new. Let's see. Pulled up things such as Celeste. Great game, not my kind of platformer.
Yeah, I had that reaction
Rotato,
when I tried to play Celeste.
Rotato, another Vampire Survivors game. Surprise. Um, Did apply for the DLC for that, but never got a response. Like zombie shooter. Not sure if anyone's familiar with the shooter games that were popular about 15 to 17 years ago, something like that. Good games up to a point until they just throw so much bullshit at you that you end up quitting. Also, since these games are from the mid-aughts, they're rather creaky.
Yeah.
See, I think honestly, the game I've been spending the most time with is one of the games up for review this week. So, anyway, that's my news for the weeks. Merrily, we shall roll into the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us this week is Anthony Flack of Claymatic Games.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing today?
Oh, great. Yeah. Nothing I like
what
better
time
than
is it over
talking
there
about
in New Zealand?
myself. Sorry, what's that?
What time is it in New Zealand right now?
It's 3:30, so mid-afternoon.
Ah, okay. Because we don't get too many people from New Zealand. We get a lot more people from Australia, which is like noon to 1 p.m. for
Yeah, a
the
few
time
hours
difference.
behind.
I think Anthony's like the second person from New Zealand we've had.
Yeah, something like that.
It's
and
not many.
David Oshry. Yeah, David Oshry doesn't count.
Indeed.
There's more of us than there used to be, certainly, in the games business.
Yeah, it's definitely a scene that's been bubbling up. But that does lead me to my actual opening question. What got you interested in video games, both on a personal and a professional level?
Well, okay, we're going to go right back. I was born in the 70s. So, when in the early days of the arcades, like the early 80s, I was absolutely enthralled with everything that was going on. I don't know how things were in other countries, but in New Zealand, there was arcade games everywhere during that time. And, I was just like, every new game that would come out, my eyes were on stalks looking. I still remember the first time I saw Xevious in 1982. We saw those silver spaceships flying over the forest landscape. And it was the first time that I'd seen a video game that sort of had atmosphere, had a visual style to it. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, wow, this is the future, this is the future of entertainment happening right here. At school, everyone was playing on Game & Watch at that time. Everybody was bringing their Game & Watches to school. So at the lunch break, we'd all be playing on each other's Game & Watches, and I was fascinated with those as well. I'd always take the battery out and put the batteries back in, so you'd get that boot up screen where you'd see all the segments of the LCD all lit up together, so you'd see how it all worked. And I would draw them because even back in those days, I wanted to be a designer, not just play games. So I would, like, on bits of paper, invent my own Game & Watches, draw up the LCD panel, how it would be with all the segments and imagine how it would all work. I just desperately wanted to try and, get something of my own up on the screen. And then in 1985, or could have been 1984 or 85, my parents bought our first home computer, which was an Amstrad, a British computer, Amstrad CPC 464, had 64K of memory, had a monochrome green monitor, and had this fantastic spiral-bound manual, thick as a phone book, that explained everything you needed to know about programming in BASIC and getting some sprites up on the screen and the sound and the inputs. And I taught myself, read that manual all the way through, taught myself how to program, started making like my own pathetic imitations of all of the arcade games that I'd be seeing, go down to the arcade every week and check out all of the latest games, come home and start programming my own sort of pathetic imitations. All of my friends had Commodore 64s pretty much during that time. That was the big popular computer. So they would all be trading games with each other, copying discs and that, and I'd be playing games at their house and then going home, not with an unpopular computer that not many people to trade games with, so I would program. And I remember being super excited about going to high school, because in high school you could take computers as a course, and they had a computer lab which was full of these BBC master computers with 128K of RAM and brown monochrome screens. And so first year of high school, I enrolled in this computer class, and that was when I ran into my first real problem, which was I found that I had already, by reading this manual at home, taught myself everything that you were going to learn at computer class in high school and more. The teacher took me aside at that point, sort of after a few weeks. I had started writing my own platform game at the back of the class while everyone else was learning sort of how to make a loop and how to make a variable.
Everyone else is working on Hello World, you're implementing.
Exactly, right? And so I finished the work and go down the back of the class. I was just like, oh, this is a new kind of computer. I'll investigate that. Started writing this platform game. I actually went back to my school years later and I found that it was still on their server. That this game that I'd written was still doing the rounds years later. But the teacher, after a few weeks, the teacher took me aside and said, look, you already know more than you're going to learn at high school. You already know more about programming than I know or anybody at the school knows. So this is a waste of time for you. I would suggest that you drop computers and pick up a different class instead. Because if you're good at something, you stop. Do something else. It's easier for the teachers, right? They couldn't. If only I think if there was someone there who could really have got me onto like learning machine code at that point, I would have been the happiest kid in the world.
If we could have locked you in a room with Burger Becky, you would have been happy as a clam.
Oh yeah. But it's just there was no pathway at that time, and nobody thought. I really wanted to make video games. There was nobody thought that was a career in the 1980s and early 90s, especially not in New Zealand at that time. So I got into doing art and music instead, and because there was no pathway for doing video games, there was no courses that you could enroll in or anything like that. There was no video game schools. I ended up going to art school, and I got in through painting, but once I got into art school, I fell into the film school. And once I got into the film school, I got into animation. And the first animations that I did were all shot on film, because this was right in that sort of transitional period where computers were still too slow to do digital editing, if people can even imagine such a time.
Yeah, now you can literally edit a full-length film on your cell phone if you really needed to.
Exactly, right? So people don't even know, but this was right at the tail end of like the first films that I edited were shot on film, 16 millimeter, were edited on this flatbed editor, and then a lot of the other stuff we were doing, we were shooting on Super VHS, and we were crash editing our films on these. They had like all of the juniors, the first years. There was one computer that had what they called non-linear editing, which is what we think of normal video editing. Back in those days, it was a big deal. They had one computer for the entire school, and you had to book it like by the hour. And all the seniors were the ones that got all the time. The juniors, we were shooting on videotape, and we were doing these crash edits with these. They had these two tape decks, and you'd crash edit from one to the other. And you'd have to do a linear edit of your film, so you'd actually have to edit it from start to finish. You couldn't insert or remove anything. You'd have to actually start again.
Literal cutting room stuff type situation back then.
Yeah. And so they had this one computer that was like set up for digital editing, and it was all being hogged by the seniors. And I thought, To hell with this. I sort of know a bit about computers. By this point, I'd got myself a PC because games like Doom had come out. And it convinced me that the PC was the future, and this was sort of early CD-ROM games were starting to come out. So I just got myself a PC. I was really trying to figure out how to program it, but it was a big, a leap from the 8-bit computers to this PC and the operating system and all of the different layers and things. And the information was hard to come back by that in those days because no internet, or the very, very early days of internet.
Yeah, the best you had was the book that came with your computer, and if it just happened to have a typo in it, you were boned.
Like I said, I memorized that entire manual, and I was getting stuff out of magazines. Magazines were a big source.
Oh yeah,
type-ins and magazines. And even just screenshots. You take it for granted now, but you wouldn't see videos of games unless you actually saw
nobody had the time to broadcast that stuff. You were either mail ordering a tape, or you were at a convention, and if you weren't in a active area, you probably weren't at a convention seeing live demonstrations of some of this stuff.
No. There was no scene for me to be a part of, sort of in semi-rural New Zealand, and no internet. So I was very, very isolated, and we were getting magazines from overseas, and I was just picking through them, looking at the screenshots, imagining what the game must be like to play. Late 90s, I'm at film school. There's this one computer that's doing digital editing, and I can't be bothered booking my time by an hour. I can see that this is, the way I want to go. I know a bit about computers. I've got a PC. I decided I would set myself up at home with my own digital editing gear. And I saved up and I bought myself a video capture card, which cost me $1,800. And the video capture card had a built-in hardware codec in it, right? Mm-hmm. So it could play back video 640 by 480, 30 playing frames per second. Broadcast quality, right? And you couldn't do that in software at that time. The computers were not fast enough to give you a broadcast quality image at 640 by 480. You actually needed this hardware.
I'm looking at the capture device on my desk now that can do 4K if I wanted to. It's about the size of the palm of my hand.
Yeah, and the computer can crunch that, right? You sitting here with my laptop, they can do that in software. It can.
Oh,
yeah, 4K, no problems. But back in those days, the video compression quality was terrible just based on the speed of the computers.
Oh, God, yes.
So I had this card that I'd saved up nearly $2,000. It was a fortune for me. But I put it in my computer, and I was able to capture video, playback video, 640 by 480, and it could output to a TV monitor as well. So I had an old Amiga monitor there plugged in by the side. I remember I had a couple of clips that I had captured with it. I had the Muppets singing Summertime. It was a 3-minute video clip that was on my hard drive, and I'd play it for people, and people would be impressed, because I could play video on my computer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I started working from home with this setup, and I started getting into animation, doing digital animation and using this card. And pretty soon I got sick of doing drawings. So I started using stop motion and models. And I'd set up a video camera, and I'd have the live feed going to the TV screen.
Yep.
And I just capture the frames at 640 by 480, and I would have a Sharpie pen that I would use to draw animation guides directly onto the monitor and just wipe them off when I was done. Do it all that way. And, the quality wasn't great because it was just SVHS quality. So there was a bit of smearing on the color and stuff. But at that time, even a digital camera was a rare thing to see. So having digitized images in the computer was quite a thing. And I was starting to learn Photoshop at that time, so I started getting into compositing, shooting things, cutting them out, compositing the different elements together. still thinking about wanting to get into video games, still not knowing how to. I had enrolled in computer science at university, and they actually called me because when you're at art school, you got to take 2 papers per year from somewhere else in the university. So I thought, I'll enroll in computer science, and maybe I'll finally get to learn sort of how to. I want to make a game on the PC. You know, I want to be able to read the input. I want to be able to load sprites, put them on the screen. I want to be able to play sounds. Tell me how to do that stuff. So I enrolled in computer science, took Computer Science 101 as my extra paper, and I got called into their office, and they said, "You've made a mistake. You've enrolled in computer science." I said, "I know." They said, "You meant to enroll in computer studies." I said, "No, computer science, that's what I want to do." And they said, "Well, let me explain. Computer studies is like learning how to use your email, learning how to do word processing, things like that. Computer science is programming, actual programming. So what you want is computer studies." I said, I know how to use email and stuff. I want to do computer science." They said, "Nobody from the art school has ever taken a computer science paper before."
Yeah, that tracks.
And they didn't think that I was going to be up to it. I had to talk my way in. But then when I got into this Computer Science 101 class, I found the exact same problem.
Oh, no.
They were there going, "This is a variable. It's like a box that you put a number in, right? Array is like a series of boxes." I went through the first semester of computer science. By the end of it, we'd written like a little Yahtzee program, just a little simple text thing that did a little Yahtzee game, random numbers, and you got to help. I aced the class, but I could see that, you know, in 2 papers a year, I'm still not going to learn anything. They're not going to let me advance because they were convinced that I wasn't going to be able to cope with 101. But I got an A+ on my 1 semester, continued on my quest to try and figure out how to get gaming, something happening on the screen. I was picking the university library, looking for programming books, but still the information was pretty difficult to come by. Graduated from university, started making TV commercials using my stop motion and the claymation and all of the digital animation techniques. Did that for a couple of years. Making TV commercials was horrible. They were like local TV commercials. They were like really low budget, and they'd give you like maybe a week to make them. Not a long time to make a stop motion 30-second commercial, you know?
Yeah, especially
So-
30 seconds. Yeah.
And
Well,
I was-
it's more having to do with stop motion being the most time-intensive
Yeah.
way of doing animation.
Yeah, well, there wasn't a lot of 3D stuff happening at that time, you know? But yeah, you've got to make the models, got to make the sets, got to set them up and shoot it all. And I just wasn't, the work was only occasional as well. So, you know, it was just when a job would come in, I'd do it. And I really wanted to do something to sort of demonstrate my animation with my own project. And around about this time, the first game making toolkit came out on the market that I was aware of for the PC. And it was a piece of software called Div Games Arena. And it did those things that I wanted. Finally was able to, you know, get sprites on the screen, get sounds to play, read the input, make stuff happen, could make a simple game. And I was, you know, obviously so happy to be able to do this. But very quickly ran into some problems because it turned out that Div was a piece of software that had been made several years earlier, but only released in Spain. And this was the English translation of that software. But the guy who actually wrote it in the first place was no longer involved with it, and it was no longer being updated. And it was DOS-based, and DOS was already on the way out. And it was more sort of like it was it was aimed at about a Super Nintendo level of power. So it ran in 256 color screen mode, and it was all 2D, didn't have any sort of support for transparency or anything like that. And it was starting to look sort of outdated by the modern standards of technology. But they were running a competition for the best game written in this software. So I had started making a game, and there were problems with the game as well, with design, but it was very nicely animated. It was showing off all my animation skills that I had acquired. So I decided to stick it out with this program for long enough to enter the competition, and this was in 1999. And I entered the competition with a game that was called Bert the Barbarian. And there are clips of it on YouTube these days, which is nice because for years I hadn't seen it. But it won the competition. So it was distributed it was a magazine competition, PC Zone magazine, I think. So the game was distributed on the CD, on the cover. And I won. The prize for the competition was a brand new PC gaming rig. Big 19-inch monitor, DVD drive, which was the big new thing at the time. I remember I had it came with a copy of Baldur's Gate on a DVD, which was a big deal because Baldur's Gate came on 5 CDs normally.
Mm-hmm.
And here it was on this one DVD, so it was all very, very fancy. And I won this big prize. The magazine was based in the UK, and I was based in New Zealand. So they had to ship it all the way to New Zealand, the furthest point in the world from them. And at this time, a new game development engine had just come out called Blitz Basic, which was, funnily enough, made in New Zealand by Mark Sibley. And it was a follow-up to Blitz Basic on the Amiga, which was, I'd never encountered Blitz Basic on the Amiga at the time, but it was, I don't know if you know the game Worms was originally written in Blitz Basic, the Amiga version.
We've heard of, I've heard of Worms. I've never played the original, that would have been done in Basic.
Yeah, I played a lot of Worms 2 around the year 2000. 2001, somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah, that would have been about the time. Funnily enough, Worms was the first thing that I actually put any of my graphics into, because they let you load in your own image and turn it into a level file. And I made some clay landscape and captured that with my equipment and cut that out and put it into a Worms level. So the very first thing that I managed to get of my own artwork into a game was a Worms level. But around this time, the Blitz Basic on the PC had just been released, and it was for Windows. It was much more up to date. It was being actively developed, and it was a much better product than Div. So the idea was that if I would enter this competition, which I won, and I got this new computer, which I was going to then switch to developing in Blitz Basic, and using this new computer to develop my fabulous new game on. Unfortunately, my house burnt down about 2 months after I'd won all of this stuff.
Oh no!
My house. It was only a rental, but the downstairs neighbor was a guy who, all I knew was that he played that Nelly song all day long. So I just hear that "Must Be the Money" coming through the floor day and night. And then one day he managed to burn the house down, where I was out house sitting somewhere else. So I didn't even find out that my house was burning down until the entire thing was up in flames. Ended up, so all of that was for nothing. But my parents thankfully bailed me out, managed to get me a new computer, a new video capture card like the old one, another $1,800. Set me up again and start writing in this new Blitz program. And the very first thing that I wrote in Blitz I wanted to see what it looked like to have parallax, like many, many parallax layers of hills of tiles scrolling past. I had this image in my image in my head that I wanted to see what it would look like. Made up a little demo of it and had a little flying spaceship flying through this landscape. Posted it up on the Blitz Basic message forum. Immediately got an offer to purchase it by the publisher of Blitz Basic, who were at that time, they were buying up like community games that were being written by the Blitz community and actually publishing them just on their budget label and getting them out on CDs into wherever they were selling them, grocery stores and things, just in the bargain bins. But again, this was it was just sort of a few years before online gaming really was a thing. So people weren't much selling games online yet. So the chance to get a game on a CD where some people might actually be able to see it, I figured it would be a foot in the door. So I sold the rights to this little demo that I made and then had to turn it into a full game. And the full game turned out to be the game that is now known as Platypus. And I did far too good a job of it for the amount of money that I was given, but I was trying to sort of make my presence known, try to break into the games industry. And they were very happy with it, and it was released on their budget label along with a bunch of other games and sort of was forgotten about. I started work on my next game, which was called Cletus Clay, and the ill-fated Cletus Clay. Forgot about Platypus. Now this was around about 2002. Online gaming, like downloadable games, was just starting to be a thing. So companies like PopCap were just starting to sell games. Raptorsoft.
Yeah, 2002 would have been a year out from the original Bejeweled.
Right. So I was around. I was in the sort of the starting of the we had a little community of game developers, and we were all selling our games from our own websites at that time because there was no Steam or anything like that, and the big portals sort of had not emerged yet. So it was very, very much a cottage industry at that time. And I had my own website as well. Everyone had their own little website, and we all linking to each other. We formed this little network. And it occurred to me that it would probably be a good idea to get the rights to Platypus back again and sort of do something with it, because the publisher had all forgotten about it. But I didn't really sort of have much money at that time. I was still working. By this time I was living in Japan. I was working as a teacher and doing games on the side. And I couldn't afford to get the rights back, but it turns out I was beaten to the punch by a guy called Mike Bay, who ran his own site called Retro64. He had a couple of games of his own, and he licensed it from the original publisher and managed to turn it into a hit game. Meanwhile, I was working on my own thing. I wasn't involved with any of that. Then would have been about 2006, I got contacted by my current business partner, Alex Silituna. He had a really good deal with a company called Pinnacle to publish games on the Xbox 360, which was just come out, and Xbox Live Arcade was the new thing, and it was going to revolutionize everything because it was a chance for indie games to appear on a console as downloadable games.
In hindsight, he was not wrong.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was fantastic. It was what I wanted at the time. So I had developed this game called Cletus Clay, which was sort of an action platform game. With you're running around, you're shooting things. It's really based on a console style controls, and the PC games market that was emerging at that time was very casual, and the games that were making money that were very casual, they were like mouse controlled. They had all of these restrictions on them. They had 20 megabyte download limit. Anything that was bigger than 20 megabytes was just not going to sell because most people were still on dial-up at that stage. I'd managed to get my game into 20 megabytes. I'd managed to have some sort of version of mouse control of it, but it wasn't ideal. It was really sort of more of a console game. It was more made for a console audience. And I knew this, but I'd spent like 4 years part-time developing this game, and the market just really wasn't quite ready for it on the PC. Like there was no Steam, there was nothing like that. You couldn't sell platform games on the PC at that time. So the opportunity to do something on the Xbox, actually get on a real console, was fantastic for me. I'd been showing people demos of this game. Alex was an experienced developer. He'd done like ports of all sorts of things. He did Alien Hominid on the GBA recently, so I'd seen Alien Hominid on the GBA. It was a really good port. I knew that he knew what he was doing. They had this great deal with Pinnacle that would fund us, because Pinnacle was trying to get into the games industry, I think. Or they were trying to do something. They had money to spend, and they were willing to offer us a really good deal to fund it. We'd have get to keep the rights to our IP and all of these good stuff. And we used the original game to make a pitch video, which we pitched to them and we pitched to Microsoft. We got everything approved. We got the money approved. Green light. We're all go. Only problem is they have conditions. It needs to be in HD. The original game was not in HD. It was 640 by 480 because that was the PC downloadable market at the time. It needed to be, they wanted co-op, online co-op. It was a single player game, but Microsoft really wanted the online co-op for part of their service. And all of this, of course, it had to be rewritten for the Xbox. So all of this meant that basically the 4 years of work that I'd done had to be turfed out and started again from scratch, which we duly did. Created the second version of Claymatic Clay for the Xbox 360. And when we were in the middle of creating that, the global financial crisis hit, 2006, 2007. Wiped out Pinnacle. Our publisher went out of business. Our funding went out. We had to flounder around, try to find another publisher. We ended up being signed directly to Microsoft, carried on for a while longer. Then the Microsoft Xbox Live Arcade team completely cleaned house. They got a whole new team in. The old team loved our game. The new team didn't like our game, didn't like the graphic style. They wanted to push, I was using photography and stop motion. They wanted to be showcasing their new 3D graphics. So they cancelled us. We ended up being wiped out. Alex lost everything. We were all reduced back to square one. And we started working freelance at that point, doing stuff for other indies. I'm technically in the game industry by this point. Alex has always been like super entrepreneurial, and he's been involved in he's always got fingers in so many pies. He was thrown out of the pie shop. So some of his other business activities ended up doing really well for him. He came into some money. He was able to finally, because for years after this, me and him were pitching game ideas left and right to publishers, trying to get things funded, trying to get things happening on mobile. The mobile market changes, and then that's no good anymore. We had something on the iPad that didn't work out. We were throwing ideas out left and right. We pitched something for VR that didn't. We were spending more time sort of pitching things than we were developing. So when Alex finally sort of came into some money through other means, we were able to, he was like, well, I'm going to provide the funding. We're going to make something happen. At that point, we were able to sort of shift and get back into Claymatic, get some other people on board, and started developing Clodhoppers, which was the game that sort of spun off from the Claymatic Clay game that never happened. we've been working on that for a while, and it's still coming up to release. But during all of that time, people kept contacting me about Platypus, which is a game that I've had nothing to do with for 20 years. But it was I think it was turning up on school computers, it was being sold in bundles all over the world. And people were always getting in touch with me about it and always wanting to know sort of what we were doing. And then eventually it got to the point where we decided we really need to do something about it. And I was able to purchase the rights to the game finally back again. 20 years later, got the rights to the game back again. We decided we're going to do a full remaster, which is what we're here to talk about today. That was a long answer for a first.
It tends to happen when we have people with storied careers such as yourself.
You're so
old people, you mean? Old people.
Yeah.
I was wearing an onion on my belt, which was the style at the time.
Yes. Anyway, so yeah, that does bring us to Platypus Reclaimed. And your people have sent us some footage of the game. From what I've been told, this is like the first in-game footage of it that it wasn't in the trailer. So
Yeah,
let's put
I
that up
grabbed
on
it
screen.
the other day so that we'll have something for people to look at.
Yep.
This is straight off the Unity window, and I put a disclaimer on it so people know that it's all not final.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened with Platypus Reclaimed was that people were asking us about it for ages and ages. Finally got the rights back. We saw that people are still buying it on Steam in sort of small numbers, but it's more than 20 years old. It's kind of incredible. Doesn't really run very well on a lot of modern machines. There's problems. Desperately needs an update. We thought we'll do a proper update for the game. We're in the middle of doing another game, but we're going to set aside some resources and we're going to do Platypus, a proper update of it. And we briefly looked into upscaling the graphics, putting them through AI upscaling or whatever. But the original graphics were, they were at 640 by 480. They were shot on a video camera. And I did some tests with my nice new modern DSLR camera that could shoot at 6,000 by 4,000, whatever.
Yeah.
With a nice lens. Did some comparison tests side by side with some new models that I'd photographed compared to upscaled old graphics. And the new ones were just like so much better that it was like, well, clearly I have no choice but to completely remake all of the graphics of the game and shoot them all again in high res. It's going to look great. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it before anybody tells me it's a crazy idea. So I'm just going to get stuck in. Spent the last year in my garage, a good portion of the last year in my garage, busily building models, photographing them. And now we're getting to the point where it's all coming together. I'm mostly done with the graphics, and we're really working on assembling the game and working on the gameplay. So this is hot off a couple of weeks or a week ago. What we're seeing, where the game is, is part of level 1. If that's what's showing, I don't see what's on the screen, but I assume if that's what you're playing,
you can see it if you can look over at the stream on Twitch. It's playing on there. Yeah, I totally forgot to set it up to play in the Discord too. That was my bad. I keep forgetting I have that technology. I just don't always use it when I should.
It's the same with it. I mean, I barely use the functions on my phone. Yes, so...
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Back?
Yeah. I was saying, I'm not surprised that you had to go in and essentially reshoot this whole game from scratch, since it runs into what I like to call the rendering problem. Because the actual footage, all the clay models were shot at a certain resolution, and you can't really change that. It's a thing that affects a lot of live action stuff from the 90s or pre-rendered stuff from the 90s.
FMV hates that we have changed resolutions at this point.
Yep. Pre-rendered backgrounds hate it. And the only solution is you just have to do it over again.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, maybe if there was an AI model that had been trained exclusively on clay models, it would do a better job of upscaling it. But yeah, it was obvious. There's no other way around it. And it's going to look so much better. And it's going to make a better story. And it's going to make a better product. And people can see how hard I've been working. So hopefully I get some kudos for that. It's not a lazy upgrade. We're doing everything. And it's not going to be just a straight upgrade. Oh, the dog. Hold on a sec.
It's fine.
interrupting pets. Like, it's been a while since we've had one of those on the program.
Yeah.
And even rarer still that it's a dog. Like, usually it's a cat, but...
Yeah, developers seem to be fond of cats generally. I know Alex has often got cats crawling all over his head when we have a meeting. But for me, it's dogs, barking dogs.
Anyway, so, those are the graphics. What about the gameplay? Will the players of the original Platypus experience any sort of changes, either big or minute, in this replayed version?
I mean, it's been more than 20 years. Of course, there's some things that have been bugging me that entire time that I couldn't help but want to change. And, just in 20 years of growth as a game developer, there's obviously things that I'm going to fix this up and I'm going to fix that up. Being my own product now rather than belonging to someone else, I'm more incentivized to actually do a thorough job. There was, some parts of the original game were quite sort of rushed, especially towards the end. So we're adding more content. There's going to be, it's not a sequel in terms of content, but there's going to be some new game modes. There's going to be some new enemies. It's going to be a little bit of an extra stage on. There's going to be new weapons, new ways to play. So we're going to have a little bit of fun making it a little bit more enhanced than just a graphical code overhaul. And there's some... Oh, sorry, yeah?
Yeah, so less a replayed version and more a sculptor's cut.
Yeah. Yes, if you will.
Quick,
I wish I could claim...
Write that down.
I wish I could claim credit for that, but Clay Fighters beat it to me.
Okay. Okay, all right.
Yeah, seriously, there is a game called Clay Fighters Sculptor's Cut on the N64. So
yeah, I'm aware of Clay Fighters because, of course, I've been wanting to make a clay animated game for so long. I'm aware of all of the other ones. Very first one that I saw was a game called Trog, which is an arcade game made by Midway. I don't think it was a great game, but it was the first game I ever saw that used claymation. And when I saw it, I was like, wow, that looks incredible. I want to do that.
Yeah. Honestly, the game that this reminds me of is Claymates. Like, just the style more than anything else. Not the, even though Claymates is a platformer.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of gameplay, this reminds me of definitely something I would have seen on the Amiga if I was aware of an Amiga in like the early 90s, whatever.
It's very much inspired by, obviously the Amiga was part of my growing up as well. I had an Amiga phase, but very much inspired by the 80s arcade games that I was absorbing. So even when it first came out, it's kind of old school. Like when I first made that, my first attempt at a game, Bert the Barbarian, had a lot of fancy animation, but had some problems gameplay-wise that made me think, well, what I'm going to do next time is I'm going to make the simplest game that I can make, without going with grand ideas about reinventing any genre or anything. I'm going to make a very straightforward game. Very good idea for a first-time game developer to do that, or any game developer really, to just sort of concentrate on the nuts and bolts and the basics and making the flow feel good, getting the timings right. all of those things that, you know, like the genre is so evolved, and there's been so many shoot 'em ups made, but I think there's something about it which expresses your individuality as a designer, just like in the timings and the flow and everyone's going to make their own shooter. If you made a shooter, everyone would make a different one, no matter how many people attempted it. There's something in the simplest forms of games. I've always been fascinated by simplicity in games, and sort of how much can you strip an idea back and still have it be compelling.
I mean, yeah, this definitely would have been an oddity when it came out, because shmups at this, you know, we're talking 2002, shmups are looking like Ikaruga.
Yes. And I had not encountered Ikaruga. I was still quite retro at that time. I'd later, when I was in Japan, I sort of went on I spent like every weekend at the flea markets, just like buying up every old console and game I could find. So
Went on a gaming bender, it's fine.
yeah, for a couple of years. So I ended up like going through all of the Sega and Nintendo consoles. I got the PC Engine. I had a great time at the flea markets. Massive pile of old games sitting around here now. And got to experience things like, you know, the treasure games, and that would all influence, you know, some of my favorite shooters I played since I made Platypus. At the time when I made Platypus, I was playing games like 1942, which is very, very old school. But they had one down at the local takeaway bar, and I loved that game. So it was very much an homage to that and games of that era. And since then, I've some of my, you know, the shoot 'em ups that I like the most, like 90s shooters, like Radiant Silvergun or Dodonpachi or Judgment Silver Sword on the Wonder Swan. If anyone knows that one, slightly more obscure.
I am aware of the Wonder Swan, but I've never had access to one.
Kind of similar.
Well, I bought a Wonder Swan. I bought a Wonder Swan at the flea market, and a Wonder Swan color.
Oh man.
It was never released here, so there were never any games that were really released with like official English. It was, for those, if there's anyone in the audience or something that doesn't know, the Wonder Swan was Bandai making a handheld gaming system to compete with the Game Boy, basically. And there's the original one, and there's a color, and I think there's a few other iterations. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of games, notably for me and Petty, Digimon, that have way more Wonder Swan games than they do Game Boy games. Mm-hmm. But it was never localized here for some reason.
It was a sad story. Because it was, the Wonder Swan was created by Gunpei Yokoi, who designed the Game Boy, right? Mm-hmm. But he'd left Nintendo at this time because he'd kind of been sidelined by Nintendo. I think the Virtual Boy was a failure, and he didn't like the sort of the very Mario direction that Nintendo was going in. I think Miyamoto was taking all the glory, you know, and Yokoi wasn't getting the respect he felt he deserved. So he left Nintendo, and he started up this rival handheld in the Wonder Swan. But then he was killed in a traffic accident, sort of before the Wonder Swan color came out. So I think that was what sort of ultimately doomed it. It was a very nice little system.
Yeah, the system's gimmick was that you could play it either in horizontal or vertical mode. It had 2 D-pads on, or 4 button arrangements on the bottom/left side of the console, and then 2 buttons on the right side.
Yes, and Judgment Silver Sword is a vertical game, so you play it. It's one of the few games that you actually play in that vertical orientation.
There's a few that you do switch between, for like the Mega Man game on the Wonder Swan, I believe, has a couple of vertical stages, but is mostly a horizontal game. But yeah, it's a neat system. Just never escaped the Japanosphere in any official capacity. Although you guys, being in New Zealand, I'm sure more of them made their way over there than made their way to the
Honestly,
US.
I don't know. I think probably I brought some of the only ones into the country when I came back to Japan.
That's fair.
From Japan. We never heard of it in New Zealand, but when I was in Japan for a few years, and I absolutely hoovered up every game and console from Japan's history that I could get my hands on at that time.
I was just thinking more along the lines of you're in much easier vacation to Japan range.
Oh, it's still 12 hours on the plane.
Okay, that's a lot, but it's not as much.
Mm-hmm.
I think all the arcade games came here on boats from Japan because we were buying a lot of secondhand Japanese cars, and I think all of the arcade games were being thrown on the boats with them, and that's why.
And I suppose Australia is meaningfully closer than New Zealand too, just due to it goes further north.
We've had devs tell us this.
Yeah.
This is why they got to do certain types of work. Like working on Nintendo games. So anyway,
just from proximity to Japan.
Yep.
I never made any, because I don't speak Japanese and I never learnt very well. I didn't make any contacts in the game industry in Japan, and I was working pretty hard as a teacher, and I had a child at that time. But I was in Tokyo, and I probably, there's some big game studios in Tokyo that.
Unbeknownst to you, you probably had a super famous Japanese game developer's kid in your class, and you just didn't know.
Yeah. Well, there was a few, gaming cafes in Tokyo that you could hang around in, and you never know who might also be in there.
Yeah. I mean, you never know when you're like sitting close to the creator of Tekken or something like that.
Yep.
Well, yeah, when you're in Tokyo, when you're in New Zealand, sort of a small town, it can be pretty guaranteed that you're never sitting next to any kind of game developer. Unless you're sitting next to me, perhaps.
Yes.
Let's see, from where I am, it's about 18-hour flight to Japan, although that does have a stop, and I don't know if that's included or not.
Yeah.
But I suppose for those people who live in the mythical West Coast, it's significantly closer, and Hawaii is closer still.
I mean, I've done the trip. It's not fun.
Yeah, I would imagine.
In fact, I had a layover in Wilmington one time. Not a long one, but still. Anyway, so getting back to Platypus here. What is the story of Platypus, and how is that evolving for this reclayed version?
The story is very, very simple, and at the time I was really into the idea of keeping the story simple and even cliched, because the nice thing about a cliche is that everybody understands it. You don't have to spend a lot of time explaining it. I was really into sort of immediacy and sort of minimal story, maximum gameplay. So I just devised this very simple story about you've got these two countries that are existing on this planet or moon that's not the Earth. One of them's very sort of pastoral, living in one with nature, and the other country is fully industrialized, and they've completely covered their entire continent with buildings, and they've got no more room to expand, and they launch an invasion into the other continent. And you play the army, the air force of the defending country, which is only a few planes, that has to fight off this invading army. And that's the basic story, and it's not changed really any from the original, except slightly expanded with a few more things happening. It's very light-hearted. You see we've got, ships exploding and fruit coming out, so it's sort of striking. It's not intended to be too serious. It's not completely whimsical, but it is the kind of game that has giant cherries and bananas in it.
Fruit is important for a balanced diet.
Giant space fruit, especially. I don't know if anyone's what was the game? Bangai-O on the N64 and the Dreamcast with the giant space fruit was one of the inspirations.
I was wondering where that came from. What does the star do?
The stars are your weapon pickups. So, and you can shoot them and spin them and change the weapon.
Ah,
A la
very
Twinbee
Twinbee.
style.
Yeah.
Same
Indeed.
wavelength, Adam. Same wavelength.
Jinx.
But one of the reasons that it did all right in the first place was because, like I said, the PC games market at that time was casual, and it could be played with a mouse with a single button. You know, it doesn't even have multiple fire buttons. It's like Sonic the Hedgehog. One button is all you need to understand. And you know, people who are well into games, you sort of take it for granted, but it can be quite a barrier to entry for people. You know, even dealing with multiple buttons doing multiple things. So having a game that I decided to make like really simple turned out to be, I think, quite an asset in the end.
I mean, yeah, shmups can be very simple. Like, honestly, Platypus is more complex than some shmups I could think of, especially on like mobile devices where they have the auto fire on. You know.
It's all rock and roll. The shoot 'em up genre, you know, it's simple, but there's an infinite
It's
room
not just
for personal expression.
It's not just that; it's also a power flex. Because shmups are a good way to show off what the system can do graphically, or at least it used to be. You know, back in the days of the Genesis and the PG-16 and all that.
Oh yeah.
Graphically, not only graphically, but musically as well.
Yeah. Like, granted, that gets into dissertations into why the shmup fell off, but that is perhaps beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. Anyway,
yeah. I mean, the community went very hardcore, right? The people who are interested in shoot 'em ups went to become more hardcore, and then it becomes more alienating to a broader audience. And I hopefully our new version of Platypus has a good skill ceiling and offers something that a hardcore shoot 'em up player might be interested in, but it's definitely aiming sort of more broadly. We're going to have like a nice easy mode for easy players, for beginner players, for young players. It's
right.
A lot of people who contacted me about the original game talked about playing it with a sibling or a parent. So it's got the 2-player mode, and a lot of people there's a lot of people playing with mixed abilities. So we only sort of wanted to do a bit more with this version to accommodate that.
Ooh. That begs a question for me. Have you looked into doing a rewind feature for this game?
No, that's not actually something I know some games do.
Yeah,
I imagine it would probably make it too easy, but it's an interesting mechanic. It would change things a lot. I don't know if it's possible with our current code base, but it's not a planned feature for this anyway.
Okay, fair enough. Especially since this is an actual remake and not just something that's being emulated or because I picked up the Toilet Plan shooters on Steam, and the emulator there has a rewind feature.
Right.
And not the only thing that has a rewind feature, but yeah, that definitely would change the nature of the game, and that's a whole other philosophical debate that's been raging on these past few years.
Since forever.
Yeah. But
even the idea of, should we have lives in a game, or should you just be allowed to play? Well, how much should you punish the player? How much should you allow the player to play the game however they feel like playing it?
It's taken on a new dimension recently because it's being framed around accessibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is fair enough, and a conversation worth having.
As somebody who not only is disabled themselves but has a disabled sister, there are a lot of games she can't play with me because her right arm is messed up.
Yeah. And like I said, that's definitely something that wasn't in the conversation in terms of like difficulty. You know, talking about the 80s, the 90s, the aughts. You know,
Yeah.
it's always, are games too difficult or the average player, never
Yeah.
like the disabled player.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
it is
also they
good that
wanted to make it hard to keep you playing longer to combat rentals.
yeah, I mean that gets into the not just rentals, but that's a very arcade philosophy.
Right. Keep
Because
shoving quarters into it, you make more money.
right, but it's also a balancing act because you don't want to make it too much of a wall, then nobody plays the game.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a fascinating conversation once you get past the surface level.
Oh, that's my life. Game design.
Indeed. That's this show.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we have a couple
is there
things from
anything?
chat real quick. Structure
Yeah.
Cubed mentioned having a practice mode where you could start at any level in any zone of that level would be awesome. So
Yep,
I can kind of see that.
We're going to have that, and you're going to be able to set yourself up sort of with a loadout of any weapons in that practice mode, and that's going to kind of. My idea is that it can act as a bit of a sandbox as well, because you can load yourself out with weapons that you couldn't ordinarily get in that stage and play through just that one little area. Yeah, so there is going to be a practice mode added. That's one of the things we've got planned.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Is there anything from Platypus 2 that's going to be in this?
I'm not actually that familiar with Platypus 2, to be honest, because they went and made it without even talking to me. So I haven't played it very much. I think there's been a few things suggested that people like from Platypus 2 that may make it in terms of enemy and thing, but none of the levels from Platypus 2 are going to be in the game. But we're hoping to have some sort of modding capability on the PC version at least. So we've got a really active kind of modding community with the original game, because I left all of the files were just bitmaps in the original version. You can replace them. People have reversed engineered the script, making their own scripts. So we've got people modding the game, and we want to make it so that the PC version supports mods. So people should be, if they want to see Platypus 2 content in Reclade, it would be possible for community members to engineer that, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody does do something like that.
Might be worth looking into Steam Workshop support then.
Yes. Well, I can't confirm anything about that, but we've been talking about it.
Something investigations are being made unofficially, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I cannot confirm or deny anything because it may not happen. We don't know, but it's been something that has been a topic of conversation this very week. Team Workshop, and whether it is something that we could consider. Right.
And as far as the console versions go, or specifically the Nintendo Switch version, is it going to be the same version that people will be playing on like the PlayStation 5, the Xbox, and so on and so forth?
I hope so, if we can get it all. The Switch is obviously the weakest one. And it's not my department. That's the coder's job to make that happen. But we're working on the assumption that we can get it running on the Switch just as well as in everything else in 4K.
So I guess I have to ask, since the trailer has been released for it, can you mention anything if there is any update or development happening on the Switch 2?
I can't confirm anything. I can't officially confirm anything that hasn't been announced. So if it hasn't been announced,
I figured
you didn't hear it here first.
It probably won't be specifically not compatible with the Switch 2.
Well, we're going to look into it. It's absolutely something we'd be interested in.
Nothing confirmed at this time.
Nothing confirmed at this time, but it caught all of our interest when we saw that the Switch 2 could be used.
Oh, there are a lot of dev friends we saw who their ears perked up about the Switch 2.
Right, but here's the thing. From what I've been hearing, like Nintendo has the red light on any sort of Switch 2 projects until like April, for obvious reasons. Like, I mean, keep in mind, Nintendo hasn't announced any games outside of Mario Kart 9. So, whatever's going on development-wise with the Switch 2, we're not going to hear about until Nintendo gives the go on that in a few months.
Fair enough. Again, figured I should ask. It is kind of my job.
That being said,
we certainly wouldn't be saying no.
Yeah,
it's definitely the potential is there. We'll be doing our best.
Right. That being said, just to clear up some confusion in the chat, the game is coming to the Switch, the PlayStation, and Xbox ecosystems, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because we've got a couple of commenters that are surprised that this game is coming to the Switch. It's coming for all the major platforms, people.
Yes.
Any word on Linux or Mac support, or is it just PC only on that front?
We'll have to see. I think maybe I've got a Mac. They always make it a bit of a pain.
I'm aware that's why a lot of people don't do Mac support, because it's more pain than it's worth for a lot of games.
Literally.
It generally is more pain than it's worth, but I still have my Mac. Mm-hmm. So we'll see about. I'm not sure if actually we had confirmed we were going to be on the Mac or not, but it's certainly a possibility.
Along those lines, have you looked into bringing this game to mobile in any capacity?
Not at present. There's no plans at present for mobile, but anything's possible. Once we get the initial release out, we'll have a code base that we may do things with in future. No mobile plans
on like Steam Deck or things of that nature.
Yes, I've got a Steam Deck. I love my little Steam Deck, and I just heard that we were going to get a Steam build to test. Alex has confirmed. I just got a message. Mac is confirmed.
All right, that's good to know.
Yeah. Any plans on making platypus merch if Reclade is successful, like plushies, toys, posters, and such?
It'd be great, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I could see a plushie. I could throw like UFO plushie at people. I don't know. We don't have any concrete plans, but it's certainly something that we could potentially. I'm getting pinged again.
Yeah.
Yes. Steam Deck is confirmed. Yes.
Anyway, so any sort of release window you have in mind for Reclade here?
It's going to be this year, and I'm not going to confirm the date.
It'll be done when it's done.
Well, it'll be done all right, but I'm not announcing the release date yet.
Fair enough.
But we're on a pretty tight schedule, and it's all happening this year.
Let me see. Are you working on anything else outside of Platypus Reclade at the moment?
Absolutely. I mean, Clodhoppers is an ongoing thing. That's in a closed beta at the moment. So that's the other game that we've been working on for a few years. And I'm also doing some hobby stuff on my own because I'm quite retro if I'm left to my own devices, and I'm doing some 8-bit coding. So I'm doing some. I've got a version of Bombjack that I've coded for my childhood computer that I'll also be putting out this year, and doing some other things along those lines. This is my Sunday afternoons. I program on 8-bit computers for recreational purposes because I obviously don't have enough game design in my life.
Well, in fairness, designing stuff for an 8-bit computer is very different than anything modern.
Right, the change is as good as the rest, eh?
Let me see. And any sort of price point been figured out for Reclade yet?
We're still sort of hashing that out exactly. I think we don't have a confirmed price point, but it'll be, in line with what you would expect for a downloadable shoot 'em up.
Right.
Are you going to try and go for the same price on all systems, or is that still one of those remains to be confirmed?
Oh, yeah. I'm not the person to ask about,
Fair enough.
details of the business decisions and just trying to get this game out.
Well,
but yeah, people will be discussing these things and making decisions on exactly how that's going to pan out.
Yeah. I suppose another thing to ask is, do you know if you're going to shoot for a physical version of Platypus Reclaimed?
Well, I cannot confirm that either.
We're running up against those walls now.
Yes, now I'm starting to sound like a politician.
It's better to not say anything and not get yelled at.
Yeah.
Believe me, I would rather you do that than I have to edit a VOD.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't want to have to force any editing.
It's happened before.
We've had people break somebody else's NDA, and that was fun.
Oh, nice.
No opposite of that fact.
Yeah, at least they did the editing.
Yeah, when I say nice, I mean no.
Yeah.
And live, too.
Oh, yeah,
anyway.
and live. Ugh.
Yeah. Anyway, so I suppose I'll give one last ask to the chat if you have any further questions, because I think we've just about run dry on ours.
Yeah. Yeah, people are hyped about clodhoppers.
Oh, cool.
Here we go. Are we going to expect any submissions coming soon? Let's like boss design competition.
Oh yes, so that we ran a competition to design a new enemy ship for the game recently, and we've had so much awesome community involvement. We've had like people submitting artwork, all kinds of things, videos to this competition, and we received so many entries that we sat down and to make a video talking about it, and I just talked for hours because we have all these great entries. So it was supposed to be announced on last Friday, and our poor community manager guys have been editing this video. So we are, I think, hoping to announce it this Friday, and finally you can get the video and watch. We talk over all of the submissions. We've got so many great submissions. And like I think there must be about 100 people submitted their designs. So the next job for me is actually going to be animating the competition winner and putting it into the game. So somebody's going to get their own creation in the new version.
Oh man.
Okay. And last question here, not platypus related, but as someone who has an interest in the history of the medium, I'd like to ask, what would you say has changed the most in video game development process for small studios in the last 20 or so years?
Whoa, that's a big question to hit me with, like, right off the top of my head.
Yeah,
I mean, you'd have to say the internet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's a little bit more than 20 years, but really things changed for me, like, when the internet happened, right? I mean,
the internet changed a lot of development, let's be real.
Yeah.
It's changed everything. I mean, like when I was talking about earlier, developing these games for myself, which I never showed to anybody. Nobody in the world ever saw any of the things that I made when I was a teenager. And just trying to get information from libraries or the backs of magazines, you know. Everything's changed completely. So, like, it was great for me to revisit my old childhood computer now and start programming it again with all of the benefits of all of the information that you can get online, the community information you can get online, all of the tools that you can download online. It's just a whole different world compared to the isolation that we used to experience back in the old days, you know?
Right. So yeah, I think that'll about do it for now. Anthony, it was lovely having you on the program here and talking about. Yeah. Always good when we get somebody who has a very long and storied career to share their experiences with us.
Old.
I guess that is another way of putting it, but at any rate, so we will not get to Ninja Gaiden this week. That'll be pushed to next week.
Assuming something more present doesn't come up.
Right.
I talked for so long, you never get to find out that I never played the 3D Ninja Gaiden games.
I mean, well, now they know.
Yeah, no, I was
That's
thinking,
okay, neither did I.
More of the games to talk about. I never played the 3D Ninja Gaiden. I know it was made by the Dead or Alive guy. I played the 2D ones.
Yeah.
Anyway,
If it was God Hand, I could talk to you about God Hand for all afternoon.
Yeah. Anyway, so that will bring us to the end of another episode of Fragments of Silicon. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live next. Along those lines, coming up on the week ahead, on Friday, January 31st, we'll be having Mario of Kawaii Games / World of Long Play. So we'll be talking about long plays on Friday, something a bit different from the usual game dev chat. And coming up on the Sunday reviews, we'll be having reviews of Tokitori 2 Plus, Liminal Core, Jotun Slayer, Hordes of Hell, and Hellskate.
And I guess I should mention our broadcast day isn't over quite yet for everybody in chat. We will be getting ready for our sister show, Moonhawk Studios Presents.
Yes. So look forward to that. And until next time,
hang on. Can I add one more thing before you do your big sign off? I can feel you're winding up for it. I just wanted to mention if people want to play Clodhoppers, we are taking sign-ups for our closed beta. So get on there and sign up. And anyone who wants to wishlist us on Steam, that always helps. How much it helps, we don't know, but we know it can't hurt. So please wishlist us.
All right. Yes, it apparently helps with the algorithm on Steam.
Indeed, in mysterious ways that we will never fully understand.
Anyway, so yeah, that'll about do it. Until next time, I wish you good game.
Bye.